The COB is brought to you by Pepperstone, trusted by traders in over 160 countries. From Barangaroo Studios, here's what you need to know about the day in business and finance.
Welcome to the COB. Great to be here with you. I'm Nadine Blaney.
And I'm Tessa Celia. Thank you for joining us on a Monday.
Why
is it every time we're together the Mondays aren't good?
I don't know.
It's not great.
It's not me. It might be you. I'm not sure. I don't know. But this was not a great day for the market. So I came on air at about 11 o'clock. And yeah, we were down, a few tenths of a percent. Then all of a sudden we were down 0.5%. And look, we've got selling happening right into the close with the COB Australia Index closed down by close to 0.7%. So Tess, as we know, still some trades going through the ASX, but
around the same. So around 0.8% for the ASX. Waiting for the final number there, but not a good day. So let's look at what our three themes are for today.
Well, I think that the discretionary retailers would have to be it. I have been just keeping a very close eye on Wesfarmers.
Early morning, you were looking at that. The news. I haven't actually seen any news about why it's fallen. About early morning was around 5%, wasn't it?
Yeah, and so now down by about 3.6%. But I mentioned it prior. We've got JB HiFi off by about 3%. So it's not like Wesfarmers is the only one. But I'm wondering, we did have that result coming through from Metcash. It did say that the hardware business was, doing it a bit tough. We heard from Mosaic Brands on Friday. Cost of living, it's real and it's hitting people's wallets.
Yeah, so there you go. So I think it's probably that the sector itself is hit. So we'll find out which of these sectors are down. So the second one that we're looking at is the healthcare sector. It's not doing well as well. And one of the big stories of today is, of course, ResMed.
ResMed
tumbling.
Yeah. Look, it's sort of deja vu for ResMed, you could say. It's relation to a weight loss drug, Eli Lilly's Ozempic. I forget. It's not Ozempic. It starts with a T. I have trouble saying it. But they did this test on how people on this weight loss drug fare when it comes to sleep apnea. Yeah. And the results are good for those.
So that's really interesting because there were a couple of those trials over the weekend, right? And it turned out that these trials were successful in proving that there were other possibilities for sleep apnea. So that kind of puts the CPAP of ResMed in trouble. So that's what investors are looking at. And I think that's probably just a spin-off, right? So ResMed and the other healthcare sector, healthcare stocks, that is, took a hit.
Okay. Miners as well. Gold miners in particular being hit. Fortescue off by 2.2%. Commodity prices coming under pressure. So let's just take a closer look at some of these individual names. You know what else happened in retail today? We saw Myer making overtures to Premier Investments to combine their apparel businesses. That would see Premier no longer an investor in Myer. It would see Premier Investment shareholders own Myer shares. It was good for Premier Investments. It was even better for Myer. Last time I checked, the share price was up maybe 15%.
We'll see the final number, but it's the only green on the board right there. And retail, of course, that massive hit. Look at Cettire.
Cettire. Luxury goods, online luxury goods. I read a really interesting note. I think it was from E&P.
So they had launched their China platform, right? But I think investors are looking at the fact that the online luxury sector is really just taking a hit from the global, I would say, cost of living crisis.
Yeah, sorry, it was RBC Capital Markets. I'm just getting it up because I thought it was really interesting, saying a challenging luxury market starting to impact CTT. But I'm also pointing out that it only has about 70 staff, apparently. And so that has sort of led the broker to say, look, it doesn't have a lot of levers to pull when it comes to cutting costs, et cetera. But that's a very punchy sell-off happening with Cettire.
Yeah, okay. Let's look at some of the miners. Again, mining taking a hit today. Iron ore prices have seen low. So all the major miners that you can see on your screen in the red as well today.
Yeah, which I thought was interesting because this morning I tweeted about it, but there was a Macquarie note put out this morning, and it reviewed its commodities update, and it said that South 32 is its preferred pick in the large cap space over BHP and Rio. BHP would be over Rio. It also prefers Newmont, Northern Star, and Evolution. in the mid-cap space, it likes nickel industries and Coronado Global Resources in met coal, excuse me.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay, another look at some of the healthcare stocks: CSL, Cochlear, Ramsay, Ansell, Sonic, all the big names that you know, all down today as well.
Yes, but ResMed was the big one in the healthcare space. All right, Kyle's here.
Yes, as always, lovely to see you, Kyle, from capital.com. Okay, Kyle, let's start with what your verdict of today's market performance, again in the red.
Yeah, and across the region as well. So I'm not sure if it was that sort of slightly spicy US data that we got on Friday night that sort of seemed to get washed out a little bit because of sort of the triple witching event. There was a lot of noise in price action on Wall Street. We didn't have the clearest lead. So we are seeing sort of broad-based weakness across the region. Obviously the ASX 200 seems to be taking a little bit of a hit, and obviously we've given back most of last week's gains. It's still very range-bound ultimately, and I mean, I think the criticism of the ASX 200 at the moment, obviously because it's cyclicality, is that there are clear signs that there's a lukewarm, the economic growth everywhere except the United States is basically lukewarm, and even at these levels, even at these prices, the ASX 200 looks fairly rich in terms of current valuations. So we're still range bound. We're kind of hovering between that, the top side of things, 7,700, a little bit higher than that. On the low side, maybe 7,200 or so, and really not going anywhere fast, so to speak. So it really is, I suppose, a bit of a continuation of that theme of kind of listlessness and directionlessness in this market, and certainly throughout the region today, it's certainly been a case where equities are on the back foot, and it should be really interesting, I think, how Wall Street opens tonight. Again, given that we had so much noise on Friday around that key data, whether we'll start to see a little bit of weakness coming through in US markets too, or whether that data will be interpreted differently. It could be quite interesting.
Yeah, so we really won't see a lot of excitement until we get that US price data out later in the week, although we do get a monthly inflation read here at home locally. Might we see some excitement around that?
Well, yeah, potentially. I mean, that's really the data point that's shifted the narrative, I think, over the last 2 or 3 months. I mean, we've had some strength, slightly, at least resilience in the labour market, but, obviously the unemployment rate's kind of ticking higher as you would expect, albeit in a very slow way. But, it's these sort of underlying price pressures building in the economy, it would seem, again, only incrementally, but it's the trend isn't fantastic, which seems to be raising these concerns about the potential of, if not higher for longer for the RBA, the non-trivial risk there could be another rate hike from the RBA. And, if we cast our mind back to last month's CPI indicator, it was that trim mean inflation figure picking up for 2 months in a row to around 4.1%. That really kind of got stoked those fears about the potential for further rate policy tightening from the RBA. So that's going to be fairly significant from a domestic point of view. Obviously we're a few weeks away now, 5 weeks away now from the next RBA meeting, so there's plenty of water to go under the bridge before we start to talk about what could actually happen at that particular meeting. But when we're talking about macroeconomic data, it's going to be about inflation this week. It's that CPI indicator, and then most importantly on Friday that will be that PCE index release, which is expected to be a little bit more positive and show a sort of a much more disinflationary trend in the United States. But nevertheless, it's that underlying inflation pulse and potentially how it's contrasted here locally with what is happening in the United States.
Yeah, so we're all looking overseas for all of those data points. And something else that I found interesting today, and I think you mentioned it in your morning note today, is the yen intervention watch. And I just saw that a lot of the region is reacting to that. Where are we at when it comes to Japanese foreign monetary policy?
So the currency is about 20 pips away from the 160 level, which was very roughly the line in the sand that we saw the Ministry of Finance intervene last time and obviously smash the currency down to what was in the space of a very short period of time to around the 152 mark, which was pretty aggressively defended by the market. But we had the MOF's Cantor coming out today suggesting or stating more or less that they're on watch 24 hours a day and will and can intervene at any time. The market markets didn't really move much of that, so it sort of seems that potentially now talk is a little bit cheap. It has been for a little while with jawboning, hence the MOF actually intervening in the currency market when it did 6 weeks ago, whatever it is now. But it would seem that we're getting very close to that point, and there is a combination of factors leading to that. There is that kind of lukewarm global growth story, the kind of outperformance in the US and interest rate differentials. But if you look just on Friday in and of itself, the data was rather disappointing well, not disappointing, I should say. It came in lower than expected in terms of the CPI release. And I should say, too, we've got a Tokyo CPI, core CPI release that we carefully watched as a result, too, in the next couple of days. And then those strong flash PMIs in the United States, really compounded that kind of impact of interest rate differentials that is ultimately weighing on the yen. So very interesting levels. Again, the market just seems to want to flirt with it a little bit. 160 was the previous intervention point. We're getting that jaw boning. So there could be some potential fireworks there. We do see an intervention in the next 24, 48 hours if it crosses that 160 mark. And it can cause all those sorts of dislocations in the region, which means, prices start to act in really sort of funky ways in the short term.
Funky. I like it. All right, Kyle Rada, capital.com. Have a good one. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thanks. Cheers.
Okay, very quickly, let's get across some corporate stories. We talked about ResMed already. There's the share price reaction, off by 13%. I was wrong. Big gains for Myer, up 18%. What else? Their Webjet had a bit of an appointment being made there.
Yes, I think and also let's not forget that they're about to list 2 different parts of their businesses.
Yes.
And so they have a new head of Katrina Barry, that is as chief executive of its hotels business, which eventually will see its separate ASX listing.
Yep, there's Cettire and Star Entertainment. It also warned on profit, but just because it's a Monday and because it was so dull out there, let's focus on the good, shall we? Myer, we talked about it merging with Premier, at least its apparel's business. It was the stock of the day today. Here's David Lane from Ord Minnett and Michael Gable from Fairmont Equities.
Yeah, it looks like it's an interesting one strategically for Premier Investments. They've been looking at a number of demerger strategy changes themselves. So they've got Smiggle and Peter Alexander, which are their premium brands. As part of this deal, Premier would retain those brands. So I think probably the way I'd be looking for it is potentially it's a better deal for the Premier shareholders than it is for the Myer shareholders. But in both cases, we've got hold recommendations on Myer, an accumulate recommendation on Premier Investments. So I'd probably be leaning a little bit more towards Premier than Myer.
I mean, if you're a Myer shareholder, this is probably the best thing going for you in years. It's been it's been a real struggle for Myer shareholders over the years. So I think potentially a good deal for both sides. We could see in the share price reaction, of course. Whether it goes through or not is another matter. I guess the only small thing clouding the announcement today is there have been some downgrades from retailers over the past few days, including Cettire today. So, the landscape in retail land is starting to look a little bit gloomy again. So, potentially that might keep a little bit of a lid on the share price. Yeah. But I think if you could look past that, I'd rate both of them as a hold. I couldn't go out buying them at current levels now that they've moved, but I'd rate it as a hold.
So there you go. There's a verdict on Myer. Best thing to happen to Myer shareholders in years, Michael says.
If you're a holder. All right, let's look at today's leaders and laggards, if it's ready.
Anyways, I'd say it's a pretty safe bet to say that
PMV, I think, will be right up there. There you go.
Yep,
up
for the 200%.
7%. Yep. AMP, I think there's a bit of news.
Yeah, nothing major. There was sort of
okay, so AMP up there as well. And Sadik Pivot, West African Resources, and COB on the leaderboard.
Yeah, we did have West African Resources price target lifted 25% by Macquarie. That's part of that note that was out there. Now, it's also recently put out some production reports, which was pretty positive. And the laggards, it's got to be ResMed. I would think it's the worst performer on the 200, down by about 13%, followed by Star. Off by 5%. Evolution Mining also off about 5% as well. UBS today saying that Evolution's cash flow yield is lower than it had previously thought. So there you go. But Morgan Stanley today lifted its price target 6% by $4 to $4.15. UBS's, by the way, its price target is $3.80 per share on Evolution Mining.
Okay, let's look at the smaller end of the market there. So, wow, that's a huge swing. Anyway, there's Encounter Resources at the top of there.
Maybe we'll look into that one.
Yeah, we should. That's a really big jump. And Novonix, recognize that name. We've had them on before, up 8.2%.
Yep, the flip side to that equation is that BrainChip is off by 11%. It's a very volatile stock. Uranium off by... Elevate Uranium down by about 11%, and you can see there in the vanadium and rare earth space some pressure coming through as well.
Okay, let's look at what is happening overnight. You've got the US Dallas Fed Manufacturing Index and a couple of FOMC speakers. We've had a slew of them over the week, so I think getting more from insight on the Fed's thinking.
Yeah, so it's a bit quiet out there, isn't it? We also get the IFO business climate coming through in Germany. Westpac says that lingering fragility in demand is set to remain a headwind to the confidence recovery in that survey in the near term. Tomorrow, here locally, we do get Westpac consumer confidence. We get the weekly consumer confidence read coming from ANZ. So Westpac's is monthly, by the way, and a couple of reports coming through.
Yep, so Collins Food, reporting tomorrow.
It'd be interesting to see what Collins Food says, just because GYG, they're called QSR now. They're called quick service restaurants, no longer called fast food.
Oh,
but
okay.
Yeah, did you know that?
No, I learned something the other day. Okay, QSR.
I think it's still fast food, but we'll see what Collins Food has to say, because, do consumers trade down, go to KFCs, or does everybody close their wallet?
Yeah, will be interesting to see what those results are like. And we'll bring it to you, of course.
The S&P ASX 200 has closed, and it has closed sharply lower, in keeping with what we saw for the COB Australia Index, which is currently on your screen, selling to the close, Tessa.
Yeah, and ASX is down 0.8%, and as far as sectors, 10 out of the 11 are in the red.
E-minis, though, I do like to check in on this, and I'm time-stamping this for those of you listening to it in podcast form a little bit later on, but we're 4:20 here in Sydney, and we've got the S&P 500 and NASDAQ E-minis mildly positive. Now, of course, that could change, but keeping an eye on that as, we've got the European markets open for business. Listen, if you are listening to this in podcast form, just a public service announcement, we'd love it if you could leave us a review. Helps us and makes us feel good
as well, because that does get people to find the podcast as well.
All right. Look, we look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning. We are live from 9:45. You can catch up with anything you may have missed online, ausbiz.com.au.
See you tomorrow.
The COB is brought to you by Pepperstone, trusted by traders in over 160 countries.
Gil.
Oh, hey, Ken.
Here we go.
You still trading?
Pepperstone. Trusted in over 160 countries. You?
Well, I'm still with...
I don't think anyone trusts them.
No, I'm fine with it. Just like I'm fine with my trusty coach. 1980s John McEnroe.
Pathetic! Horrible! 1980s, huh? So, really temperamental?
Keeps me on my toes.
Awful! It's a bit intense.
Be better!
I'm still fine with it.
Use your racket!
He's just staring at us.
Yeah, sometimes he yells and then sometimes he just stares.
Is he aiming for your face, Gil?
He's fine with it!
Yeah, he's definitely trying to hit you.
Fine with it.
Don't be fine with it. Switch to Pepperstone, trusted by traders in over 160 countries.
Come on, you cannot be serious!
Don't do that.
Ow.